Previously, an office worker passed away after being caught up in a tragedy involving a police officer and a burglar. He cried in agony, and his cries reached God. He was then reborn in a magical world as a healer with a blessing from God. He joined a healer guild to become stronger and began training with a seasoned adventurer named Broad to hone his martial arts skills. The sun rises. Luciel sets off for the Healers Guild. Upon arrival, he visited the guild to renew his membership and was surprised to find an exhausted Kururu there. Luciel questioned his presence and expressed annoyance. Kururu mentioned that working had become tough since he took Monica to join the Adventurous Guild. She has been trying to hire new employees, but nobody comes forward. Confused, Luciel looks around because the only hard work she's doing right now is breathing and complaining. He defends his decision, explaining that it was safer for Monica at the Adventurers Guild since someone was after her life. He then gave Kururu his card to renew his membership. Kururu told him to wait a minute and discovered something surprising while checking his card. She asked how he was living and what crazy training methods he had been doing. Luciel explained that he was staying at the Adventurers Guild. Kururu couldn't believe it and asked for more details. Luciel shared his experiences and his goal to improve self-defense and holy magic skills. Kururu thought he sounded like a weirdo, but Luciel explained that he just wanted to improve his self-defense skills so he doesn't get killed, and healers can improve faster with higher patient volume. As Luciel contemplates his decision to train at the Adventurers Guild rather than the clinic, Kururu then questions why he couldn't improve his skills at the clinic, where he would also get paid for healing. Luciel explains that there's a difference between healing for money and receiving a reward from a satisfied patient. He emphasizes that learning to defend himself is something money cannot buy. After realizing her mistake, Kururu apologizes. Kururu proposes raising his healer rank since he has reached the required skill level. She explains that although his tax will increase, he will gain access to more powerful spells. Luciel is curious and asks about the cost of the grimoire, which turn out to cost 90 pieces of silver. He is shocked by the high price and wonders if they're trying to steal from him. Checking his pocket, he realizes he only has 3 silver coins to his name. It becomes apparent that he needs to find a job that pays well to afford the grimoires and manage his expenses. Suddenly, Broad appears behind Luciel and drops a bag of money on the counter. He proposes a deal to the Healer Guild, loan Luciel to the Adventurous Guild for a year for 1 gold coin, with the guild covering his wages. Initially startled by Broad's sudden appearance, Luciel asks what he's doing there. Broad explains that he forgot to give Luciel his payment and then extends the offer for him to be a regular resident of the Adventurers Guild. Luciel, still surprised, accepts the request, mentioning that he hasn't managed to hit Broad yet and that he'd love to work for the guild if he's paid accordingly. Kururu whispers to him, asking if he's sure about his decision, but Luciel explains that Broad is his instructor and a trustworthy person. He then accepts the request, and she wishes him good luck. With the money, Luciel buys some spell tomes and returns to his room in the Adventurers Guild. He sets a new goal for the next year to learn as much magic as possible. Soon after, Broad knocks on his door, reminding him that it's time to get dinner. Luciel realizes he must become strong enough to travel safely. As they head towards dinner, Luciel is taken aback to discover a warm reception awaiting him. The adventurers have gathered, clapping and cheering to welcome him back. Broad happily explains that it's a welcome party since he is now a temporary employee of the guild. During the festivities, Gulgar offers Luciel some substance X. The smell is so repulsive that everyone takes a step back from him. Reluctant to drink it, Luciel is persuaded by Goldberg and the others to do so just to avoid the smell. Raising his glass, Luciel makes a toast to the adventurers who accepted and helped him during his time there. He wishes them all to come back alive from their missions and expresses his desire to work with them for another year. He then bravely chugs down his glass, shocking everyone who can't believe he's willing to drink it. While Luciel is eating his meal, Basin and his group approach him, commenting on his smell. Basin then asks a surprising question, inquiring if Luciel is interested in guys. Luciel is taken aback by the question but explains that he has been mostly focused on training with Broad. He spends some time with the receptionist girls but refrains from making any moves, fearing Broad's reaction. He clarifies that he has been prioritizing training to increase his chances of survival and hasn't had time to pursue romantic interests. Luciel confesses that he was initially terrified during his first 6 months in this new world, as carrying weapons casually is not common where he comes from, though he momentarily forgets how he died in his original world. Basin pats Luciel's head and assures him that nobody will pick a fight with him in their town, and if anyone dares, Basin and his group will protect him. However, Basin playfully brings up the topic again, asking if Luciel is truly into girls and proposing to go out for some adult fun. Luciel gets excited, not aware that such places exist in town. However, Monica interrupts them by calling out Luciel's name. Worried that she overheard their conversation, Luciel is relieved when she asks about the Healers Guild. He replies, mentioning that Kururu seemed bored, and asks if Monica is enjoying her stay at the Adventurers Guild. Monica expresses her love for it, especially because she gets to see her savior, Luciel. The situation between them becomes tense as they both blush, and Luciel finds himself making a move on a girl for the first time. However, they stop when they realize Basin and the others are watching them. Meanwhile, in another part of town, Batakali, the leader of the biggest healer clinic, is troubled by a decline in profits and slave acquisitions. His men blame Luciel, who now works for the Adventurers Guild, for the city's situation. The next day, as Luciel is resting from his training, he overhears Nana telling Batakali that he cannot enter the training grounds. Batakali then approaches Luciel and asks if he is the healer living in the Adventurers Guild. When Luciel confirms, Batakali rudely calls him an impudent brat. Luciel inquires about his identity, and Batakali introduces himself as the owner of a clinic. Luciel finally recognizes the name and realizes that Batakali is the same person who tried to assassinate Monica. The old man arrogantly orders Luciel to quit working at the Adventurers Guild and work at his clinic instead. However, Luciel firmly refuses, explaining that he is here on an official transfer. This infuriates Batakali, who claims that Luciel cannot refuse a merciful direct order from him. Luciel counters that true mercy doesn't involve threats or forcing someone to quit their job. He questions why he should work for Batakali, who becomes even angrier and reveals that people have stopped going to his clinic since Luciel joined the Adventurers Guild. Luciel points out that people avoid a place with a bad reputation, explaining the reason for the decline in Batakali's business. As Batakali continues to argue with Luciel, the young healer points out several situations and asks what kind of spell Batakali would use. Surprisingly, Batakali admits to using high heal and charging a hefty 30 pieces of gold. When Luciel questions what happens if a patient can't afford such a price, Batakali smugly replies that it's a trade secret but assures he has a way to ensure payment. Luciel then exposes Batakali's dark secret: he is selling patients to other countries. Luciel argues that most of the situations he mentioned only require low-level healing spells, like heal or middle heal, to save the patients, so Batakali is extorting them. However, Batakali insists on using high-level magic and charging exorbitant fees to maximize his profit per patient. Luciel believes that using appropriate spells and reasonable prices will result in more long-term earnings, but Batakali is solely focused on immediate profits. Luciel strongly believes that healing magic should be used to save lives, but Batakali dismisses his naivety, saying that he used to think like that when he was younger. He adds that healers are often insulted and attacked when they cannot save people after exhausting their magic. At that moment, Batakali explodes with anger and orders his men to kill Luciel. They draw their weapons, but before any harm can be done, Broad suddenly appears and restrains them. He threatens to investigate Batakali's business, sending the old man fleeing in fear. Luciel thanks Broad for saving him, and his instructor is surprised that the biggest healer in town is interested in Luciel. Luciel mentions that Batakali was probably a good healer at one point. A few days later, Broad informs Luciel that troublemakers have been asking about him, and Luciel dismisses it, thinking he hasn't done anything shady in over a year. However, Broad warns him that they might target him to gain favor with Batakali. Considering the current situation, Broad decides to change Luciel's training focus from healing to a Spartan regime. Luciel is confused as he's just a healer, but Broad assures him not to worry and promises to double his training intensity while increasing his meals and substance X portions. Under this new rigorous training regime, Luciel faces the normal daily beatings, but never gives up. People are astonished by Luciel's resilience, and he earns a new nickname, the Healer Maso Zombie. Though annoyed by the name, he doesn't let it deter his determination to keep going. A few days later, Luciel discusses with Monica that more people have been joining the training ground, following his example, and the survival rates have improved. As he heads down to train, Broad asks if he can use a barrier spell. Luciel confirms, and Broad throws him to the ground, impressed that he didn't get injured or die. Confused, Luciel asks why. Broad explains that he will need to use it because his training is about to become even more painful. Luciel is told by Broad to learn how to use a sword and shield. Despite feeling discouraged, Broad reminds him that he has spent a year building Luciel's physical foundation. While he may not be exceptionally talented, his hard work has impressed Broad, who wants to take him on as an apprentice. Initially perplexed, Luciel eventually agrees to accept Broad as his master. Broad then prohibits Luciel from checking his status and skill levels in the future. He explains that relying on numbers can distract Luciel from the true path to becoming powerful. Broad emphasizes the importance of mental fortitude and strategic thinking in achieving true strength. Luciel embraces these instructions and prepares for the real training by activating his barrier. During the training, Broad teaches Luciel a new perspective on the fight. Instead of avoiding his master, Luciel decides to strike back with determination and rushes forward to face the challenge head-on. From that day on, Luciel spends 6 days per week training, dedicating 1 day per weapon type to learn as many skills as possible. Meanwhile, Batakali receives another report about Luciel's healing costs, and he becomes infuriated when he learns that Luciel is only charging 1 silver coin per healing spell. He fears that such reasonable prices will drive him out of business, so he decides to write a letter to the head of the Healers Guild, falsely accusing Luciel of charging absurd prices and requesting him to be transferred.